What's up, you crazy listeners? Welcome to the show. Today's guest is someone that's becoming a really good friend, and he was actually episode number 2 on Openly Outspoken. And some of my favorite guests and closest friends I will have on more than once. His episode was one of my favorite to date. It was a little bit after everything that happened with George Floyd. It was in the middle of the BLM protest, and we talked about kind of the state of racism and where he felt everything was at, and his opinions on everything going on and police brutality. And we agreed on a lot of stuff and we disagreed on a lot of stuff, which is okay, right? And that's kind of the theme of how I do my best to live my life. I'm not perfect at it, but how I do my best to live my life. And how we should aspire to interact with people is just have conversations even if you don't agree. So we're recording this early 2021. I wanted to get his thoughts on where we're at now that some time has passed since a lot of the BLM protest and since everything that's went on, as well as the Capitol riot just happened. So we compare and contrasted some of the BLM riots and Capitol riots, and really just got his opinions on the state of racism in the U.S. in 2021, and what are some possible things we can do to improve. So it was a great conversation. We always have good conversations. We play Xbox and stuff, so I feel like we make a podcast like almost every time we're playing video games together. So, and it's a cool relationship to have. So if you enjoy this, share with your friends. These are the kind of conversations that more people need to hear, more people need to be having. Rate 5 stars and subscribe and all that fun stuff. So enjoy the episode.
This is Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams, where differing opinions are not only accepted, they're encouraged.
All right, Lechon, welcome. We are live. Thank you for coming on for the second time.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy Adams, the great.
Yeah, man, and we were just adjusting my lighting. Thank you for doing that and helping advise. And I'm not shy to delegate to people smarter and with more experience than me. You can ask anybody on my team. That's why I've got to the point where I just hire or partner with a bunch of people that are smarter than me, and then there's not much left for me to do. So that's kind of like my vision on business and life. So then, because you get to the point where they're so smart that, like, what could I even help them with? But the key is asking them if you can help with anything, even though they're gonna say no, but they still feel good that you're asking them. So it's just like it's about just like showing that you're there. And I would help if they needed help truly, but they're just like, what would he help me with? But it's like the gesture. So
the gesture matters in this particular context. Like, for anyone who doesn't know, I was in multimedia and like commercial photography for like a long time. I started with film in the military in like 2001, maybe. I think I had my first film camera. So a lot of years into like what is the right, looks and tones and textures, got into branding, did editorials, magazines, billboards, all kind of different things before I even went into like the online marketing business world. So I just have a lot of experience there with how things look.
Yeah, for sure. No, I trust you. You definitely have more experience than me. So we'll do something maybe around the Super Bowl party. Maybe I'll see you then, and you can really get my shit straight. But anyway,
level you up. Yeah.
I know a main topic I want to get to, and we were talking the other night. We just started playing a little bit of Madden, which we can both agree Madden nowadays is absolutely fucking trash. But it's just there's no other option, so we play it because it's football and it's still like. It's wild that in 2021 now, the modern Madden is not as good as it was in 2005.
In fairness, it did release after a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world, you know.
But
So I
even the
really,
one before though was bad. You know, like the whole
but it
modern
was
Madden.
significantly better though, like in terms
Okay.
of gameplay.
There's because I live downtown Orlando and we're pretty close to the EA Sports building in Maitland, and I saw a guy wearing an EA shirt like a few
Wanted to
months
beat
ago. I
his
was
ass.
like, "Yeah, are you on the Madden team?" I'm like, I just looked at him in disgust. I'm like, "I've bought your game. I've spent $60 every year for 16 years now." And I just want to say, as a I used to be like competitively ranked. There was a while I was top 100 in the world on Xbox. Like I was really hardcore into it, and the game just is bad now. So anyway, you can justify their badness because of all the crazy stuff in 2020, but it's been going downhill for a while. I don't mean to sound negative because I feel I'm overall a very
I'm
positive
just
person.
I'm just giving them a little runway for possibilities here.
Okay,
It's
well,
not. It is by far the Madden I've hated the most. So I'm
let's
with
just
you.
say this EA guy in my building is not invited to the Super Bowl
Oh
party.
my god.
So no, I'm just kidding. I only saw him that one time. He probably doesn't come out a lot, being like a game developer. So I was lucky to see him that day. But
Catch him flipping.
you were on episode number 2, which is awesome. And now this is episode 20 something. I don't know, maybe 20.
Man.
Yeah, mid to late 20s. I forgot the episode I'm on right now, but when we first talked, there was some crazy shit going on. It was a couple months after the George Floyd incident, and um, we had a really good conversation, I thought, and I got some good feedback. People messaged me and said they really enjoyed it, and they felt like I shared some good things that more people wish they could say, as well as they feel like they learned some new perspective from you, which is what I want to accomplish, right? Is like, let's just have conversations about things, and it's not about being right or wrong per se, but hopefully there's new perspectives that both sides can bring. So if I leave with one new perspective on one topic, this whole conversation is worth it for me. So I want to kind of do a follow up, because that was about 6 months ago that we obviously talked in between and like our private lives, but as far as listeners are concerned, it was about 6 months ago and a lot has changed. So I wanted to kind of get your thoughts as a black man in America, where you feel like we've come in this country now in 2021 from everything that happened during the summer of 2020 regarding race.
Yeah. Well, it's loaded, you know. I think what I would say is things have gotten significantly worse from my perspective, and I don't have any data to back that up, Jeremy. And we'll talk about that too. But things have gotten worse in terms of how what's happening from day to day. Like I don't think it has gotten worse necessarily between race relations with black people and white people and everyone else in between, but I definitely feel as though, like from a political perspective, things have gotten heightened, more intensified. Certainly from the right, you know, and I don't know if that's kind of like a backlash from all of the things that were happening with the protests on the left, you know. But it does seem as though things have intensified, you know. Thousands and thousands of people just raided our Capitol building, you know, and so I do feel as though things are intensified. Not as much for black people, you know. Right now, everyone's like kind of saying, watching all the white people show their ass, and we're like, oh my god. And for the people that are more conservative, you know, I don't know that they would really want to be associated with like the extreme levels of what people are doing, you know, at the stage. It's really kind of crazy to watch. We're just kind of standing back.
Yeah, so I want to talk with you about some compare and contrast between the riots for the BLM movement and what just happened in the Capitol building. I want to talk about that in a second. But what specifically do you mean, like, from your perspective, things have gotten worse from, like, race relations? Like, the race, obviously, I know a lot of what seems to have inspired the overtake of the Capitol is the election being rigged and not having trust in the democracy, slash people just are really, really loyal to Trump, and Trump has a lot of influence over a certain group of people. So so I don't know if those are necessarily race related from what I can see, but I'm curious from like a race perspective, like how you feel specifically things have gotten worse.
Yeah. So in our last conversation, we talked a little bit like about the idea of white privilege and all those kinds of things. And I think for a lot of white people, that perspective isn't real, you know. And what kind of really stood out to me with a bunch of people kind of raiding the Capitol was this response from like police officers and security and even the government, not only from how they talk about it in their language, like there's not very much language of people talking about these people being domestic terrorists or, thugs and, these kind of derogatory names. The way that it's described and talked about even is, the people are really upset, and these it's just handled with like a soft white feather glove. It's just so soft and so careful about making these people sound bad, even though there's like Nazis in the crowd like chanting, and they're bringing the gallows to hang Mike Pence. Like very very little high level aggression. They were very I can't even talk right now. They were met with very little aggression in that regard. And if you watch it on video, the contrast between what happened there and the contrast between what's happened in most of the other protests, there was much more aggressive, lot more physical attacks, a lot more arrest immediately. It was just really crazy to watch. And I think it's hard for me to take out the idea that it is because of race, just because of how aggressive cops generally are toward black and brown people in this country versus like lots of others. It was just really weird. Not that I don't want for people to have, be violently attacked, and I don't want them to be aggressively slammed to the ground or maced or shot or any of those kinds of things. I don't want that for anyone. But there's definitely a stark difference.
Do you feel the media could have influence over the average American's like perception of what happened there? Because I mean, this was one incident, right? A lot of people, and it was a big incident, but this was one incident. There were across dozens of cities just in the U.S. Like we can just talk about U.S. We don't have to talk about outside of the U.S. But just in the U.S., there were dozens of major cities that had protest. Thousands and thousands of people with their phones out. And I feel a narrative could be painted that these protests were treated one way and then this was treated another way. But in all actuality, like, do you think they could in most cases been treated a lot more similar than kind of what you're implying? Because again, there were dozens of cities and then multiple nights. I mean, hundreds of nights of major protest in the United States, right? Across, would you agree with that? Multiple nights across dozens of cities in the U.S., hundreds of nights of major protest.
Sure.
And I mean, if you go across hundreds of individual protests, I feel you're going to be able to cherry pick the worst case scenarios. But like the cities that I've seen, and again, every city is different. Obviously, like New York, I know got pretty extreme, and Portland had some major issues. LA, like just like the looting and stuff going on in like
Sure.
Santa Monica and stuff like that, which I will admit, like a lot of the videos I've seen, a lot of looting is like there's tons of white people doing that shit too. So there's just people there taking advantage of a
Yeah.
bad opportunity. But I mean, I would say for the most part, like people were treated with respect for the BLM protest. And again, there are examples that people caught on their phone and stuff like that when you're looking at hundreds of protests. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, loaded question, right? And
Well,
I'll try to unpack it in segments, right? Um, so one is, do I think the media has an influence on a certain demographic? Absolutely. Both ways. I don't feel that the media has been honest for a long time, and that's the real truth of it. I think what we're starting to see is how inflammatory language and deceptive tactics can actually be brought forth. Like, you can manifest it and bring it forth into people's actions. That can turn into violence, that can turn into a complete narrative of how you perceive other people. And I definitely feel as though the intentions haven't been good from the media for a long time, and certainly from most of the people on the right. That's just kind of a part of the language that they use to describe it. Now, I think it's a really dangerous place, because not only does it appear to me as though the media is not a very good source of information, it also appears as though we're at a really critical time in democracy, where, though I don't like what Trump has to say, I don't really like his energy at all. I don't think he's a real tough guy. I think that he pretends to be a tough guy and talks, the language, but I don't believe that he is that guy. But he's still aware of his ability to impact people and drive them to the next level of aggression or upset or change narratives about who other people are. So I really don't think that the media or tech companies or any of those kinds of things should have the ability to silence the president. However, I do feel as though the people that are in our leadership should have taken the right measures to calm and redirect his intentions or his energy around all of these things. So it's all pretty inflammatory from my perspective.
yeah, you talk about the language being used, like not saying words like terrorists and stuff. I mean, I agree, on Fox they're not calling these people terrorists, but on CNN and MSNBC and on Twitter, like, I've seen tons of terminologies, uh, like domestic terrorist and things like that. And just to be clear too, there were, as far as I know now, there's been 100+ people that have been arrested since what happened in Washington. So there are people being arrested. Again, as far as I know, and I know there's different reasons. I'm not an expert on this particular topic or security or anything like that, but when it comes to what they were dealing with, from what I've heard, the reason there weren't more arrests made day of is because they were undermanned. But people are getting arrested now, and I know the number is 100+. I don't know the exact number, but I know a lot of people have been arrested. So I do, there's things, and I've been pretty open about my political beliefs. There's things I'm like pretty conservative on. There's things I'm pretty progressive on. I just look at everything and make my own decision.
Sure.
I don't feel like I'm a partisan though on either side, which is great, and which is great for me. Again, most people may feel that way. I'm very confident that I'm not a blinded partisan. Like, there's, again, lately, like, and I've been open about it, I've leaned more conservative because of lockdowns and because of government overreach and things like that, where I'm like, okay, like, I'm leaning more conservative and I'm going to be open. But I'm not like a blind, like, card carrying Republican that anything a Republican stands for, that's what I stand for. So with that being said, and by the way, I will say, uh, Obama was really, really heavily attacked in, basically his entire presidency, from right-wing news outlets and right-wing influencers and things like that. And I feel the opposite started happening for me, where I was shifting left. under Obama, because like everything he was doing was being attacked, even unfairly. And I'm like some of this stuff, like some of the things Obama was doing were conservative, arguably. Like he killed, tons of people with drones and stuff that conservatives would normally be like excited about, right? And he was attacked. So I felt like that constant attack on him made me, in some ways, lean more left. But where I'm getting is I feel like I can look at both of what happened, the BLM riots and the Capitol riots, and I view them as like equally bad, from a sense of anytime there's property destruction or trespassing or violence, those people should be criminally prosecuted, like evenly. Like I view it as like the exact same thing. Both sides have their First Amendment right to protest and to be upset and to say things that are on their mind and share their frustrations. Both sides equally have that right. But
Yeah,
I view the
I agree with
violence
that.
on both sides equally bad. What are your
But
thoughts on that?
oh yeah, I don't think it's equally bad at all. I think there's a real distinction between there being a riot and people burning down their corner store and running into Target and grabbing the TV or something, though that's freaking ridiculous. Like you got to think of like the mindset of someone that's even doing that. Like what kind of life are they living, right? Probably not amazing. But I think there's a real distinction there between that and then raiding the Capitol building. Like you have to like there's going to be an impact of that gesture for years to come. Like first of all, like it showed how ill-equipped the security was around our leaders at arguably one of the most important times of their lives, right? They could have been slaughtered. You know what I mean? And it showed the rest of the world how how badly our security is actually set up around those things. What's to
Vulnerable.
stop?
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
agree.
vulnerable.
Yeah.
What's to stop someone a country or that views us as an enemy to send some small force, heavily armed and heavily trained people to go and handle business at a time that they want to? It really wouldn't be that hard. That's a mob. And you could argue that some of those people are maybe ex-military or whatever, but 100 people got arrested. That's good. But the bad problem is how many thousands and thousands, what was there, 50, 100,000 people there and 100 people got arrested? There are lots of different ways that these people can be tracked. And, I just think there's a real distinction between breaking in a store, though you shouldn't do that, and also you should face the consequences if you did, right? But I think there's probably levels of consequences. Like there's a difference between a hit and run where you smack someone's mailbox or, running over people in the Capitol. It's crazy town. And to also touch bases on something that you said earlier, there has been violence with riots and protests throughout the last couple of years. But I do believe that traditionally speaking, how they're perceived and how they're handled are completely different. Like when you look at some of the Black Lives Matters protests, the level of aggression that they have been met with on many, many occasions is completely different than some of the right-wing protests. Like they're walking around with, automatic rifles and loaded weapons and fully armed gear. And, when they're marching in that and rebel flags and all this kind of stuff, and they're not even perceived as a threat. Like they're not even a perceived threat.
Wouldn't like, and again, I know there are some cases that back what you're saying, but there's mass amounts of opportunities for video footage and police interactions and stuff across hundreds of protests, right? There was one here, and again, I think there were like something like, I've heard numbers 500,000 total people there. Not everybody invaded the Capitol building. Obviously, not 500,000 people could fit in I never thought about it till just now. Imagine the parking situation for 500,000 people to
It's
be.
probably bad.
They probably
Probably
walked
bad.
for like 10 miles.
Probably not enough porta potties if someone shit their pants for sure.
Yeah, that's probably a logistical nightmare. But I just like I
I'm
would
like imagining Woodstock.
yeah, with a bunch of like
Oh my god.
AR-15s. So yeah, not again similar to, in which we both can agree on, similar to the BLM protests. Probably 99% of people, maybe even higher, but 99% of people were peacefully protesting, exercising their right because they were questioning the validity of our election. Most,
I don't actually have a problem with that.
and neither we shouldn't, because I don't think, and that's where I do agree Trump was irresponsible. It's one thing for him to say, "Hey, I'm going to do all the due diligence. We're going to have an investigative team working around the clock to make sure that this election was valid and every vote is counted properly. There weren't fraudulent votes. We need to make sure that our democracy always is intact and legitimate." And if that was the verbiage that Trump would say, like I think that would could have accomplished the same thing. Maybe even got some more like center and bipartisan support to just like, hey, I do believe that we should just always make sure our democracy is intact. But he would constantly say the election is rigged and constantly say things like that. That again, not a majority of Republicans, not a majority of his base, not a vast majority, but the handful of extreme that just take everything he says to heart, and it gets them, really, really worked up to the point where crazy shit happens, and that's what
Yeah. I mean,
not
it
yeah
says a lot about how we elect who we call our leaders, and how like who we put in place of positions of power. It says a lot. He said the things the way that he said them because he's intentionally inflammatory. And also, I truly believe that, and this isn't, this is my perspective, but I do believe that he feels the way that he's saying these things. So, maybe he's being dishonest, but he's definitely being inflammatory intentionally, right? And so, but he words things in a way that allows him to have some sliding room to back out and say, oh, well, that's not what I meant. Okay, well, other people are understanding it a completely different way, and you're aware that they are understanding it that way.
yeah I mean, it does definitely just show as humans how I mean, we have lots of cults in this world, right? But it does show like humans, although we all feel we're independent thinkers, we're really not as much independent thinkers. And again, I would there's examples on the right and left of this. We're obviously talking about the more extreme on the right now, but there's the identity politics, I would say, is something on the left that's is almost a cult at this point. But like I'm curious. So back to kind of what you're talking about. You view everybody, and I've heard this narrative a lot, and I'm not saying it's incorrect. I just want to just like challenge that statement. Um, like, is there a possible confirmation bias on your end where it's like every incident you ever see where a black person is treated misfair or like improperly or unfairly at a BLM protest, again, which there's way more opportunities for footage and countless more interactions with police, and there was like planning, so there was like police knew and other armed forces knew to be there, and where this was again a little bit different, there wasn't as much prep, obviously, and that's what showed the vulnerability, which we could agree on that. But every time we see a black person being maybe treated more harshly than a white person, is that just for the rest of time going to create a confirmation bias that black people just aren't treated fairly, and
No,
white people are like, they can just walk around with guns and no one's going to even call them a terrorist? Because I feel like that happens on both sides pretty equally. Like, even remember I think this was right before George Floyd, when the lockdown started. There were armed people in Michigan, like, we don't want to be locked down, and they went to uh, the governor's office like armed, and like the left called those people basically terrorists. You know what I mean? And they were obviously, I believe Michigan, you're allowed to open carry, so they weren't breaking any laws. But I do see it's like it's almost the same to me on both sides. Like I feel like there's hypocrisy and an amazing amount of hypocrisy on both sides, and I'm curious like if you think there's a possible confirmation bias on your end where it's just like anytime you see this, or like what you just said earlier, like these white people were just treated completely differently, and I don't know if that's necessarily true. It could be like again
They
I
made it home, bro.
but
Do you?
tons of people from BLM protests made it home and riots. Like
Because
why?
they didn't raid. Because they didn't raid the
But
Capitol.
there were cases where they raided other government buildings, police stations, and things like that. Maybe it's not the federal capital, but there were still
Bro,
government
it's the
owned buildings.
federal Capitol in DC. Like it literally is the mecca of all of our leadership. You know, I think it says. I think it really says something about our security here. To answer your question, though, and I'm not trying to cut you there. Um, do I think that there's going to be confirmation bias? Maybe. I'm not without fault, and I don't think anyone's like without fault. But I'm not looking for confirmation bias. I think where there's a real difference is that black and brown people in this country are battling against almost a lifelong narrative that black is bad, white is good. And it has existed in our books, or hasn't, or stories haven't existed in our books. It's existed in our music, it's existed in movies and how we're portrayed. Like, so there's this inherent narrative that black people are dangerous and will harm you and will do certain things, or are underhanded and nefarious and all these kinds of like negative terms. This, for most people, is the filter of how they see us, and how they see white people is completely different. White is right, white is great. You know, you guys are smart, you're clean, you're well intended, you're going to go to college, you have together families and all these kinds of things. So like the average person is not viewing you the same way that they would view me. Now we know that, you know, just from our personal conversations that, you know, I came from like a pretty rugged background and then went into the Marine Corps. I know that you came from a pretty rugged background on the other side of the tracks. You know, we're coming from these different areas, but how the world is going to view the two of us, completely different. Completely different. So is there bias there? Maybe there's some bias there, but you got to get, like, I don't have a thing against white people. My wife is white. I'm in an interracial relationship. I've been in several. My kids are mixed. You know, it's not even like I have a thing, you know, against white people. I love people, period. I don't really care what color you are, but I can see the difference between how some people are treated in certain scenarios and how others are treated in other scenarios. Once again, like some of those are based on a case by case basis, but it's really hard for me to believe that if it was a Black Lives Matter left protest raiding the Capitol to go get all the Republican senators and like zip tie them and hang them and all this other kind of stuff, that it would be treated in a completely different way. Like they would have been signaling their cell phones and and firing off all the FBI nodes and all these kinds of things, and they would have been tracked before they would have locked down DC with them in it, you know?
I mean,
And that's just my perspective.
obviously there's no evidence and to that would be the case.
That's why I said that's just my
yeah, it's a
perspective.
feeling, but I
There's
again
no data to back that up.
yeah, which and I've seen a lot of comments that are those are feelings, and maybe that would be the case, maybe it wouldn't be the case, but we obviously don't have supporting evidence that would be the case. But we both agreed that it showed how vulnerable the federal building was. Like, I personally don't think it would have been treated that much differently because, again, there just wasn't the manpower. Like, I don't think even like, and I mean most legitimate Republicans have come out and criticized Donald Trump for how he communicated, have said all of this violence and everybody needs to, deserves to be arrested and, go to jail for a really long time. And, I don't think anybody credible, vast majority of the country is denying that. But I just don't like how, like, let's just assume it was all BLM crowd. So just, I guess the BLM crowd is a mix of a lot of white people. So some of the crowd could have looked
A
the same.
lot,
Yeah, some of
ton.
the crowd could have looked the exact same. Maybe like, maybe not wearing like,
I actually didn't know that until I went to one.
yeah, yeah. Well,
I was shocked. I was like, wow.
I think it's start like from what I've seen, and again, there's no data to support this either, so this is also a feeling. But I feel like it was a higher percentage of, uh, black and Hispanic crowd and stuff to start, but near the end, like what I would see in Orlando, like what I would drive around, it was like mostly white people. So I thought that was interesting, but I don't think it would have been handled that much different because there just wasn't the staff, and like even if the people did want to do what you're saying, which there's no evidence, but even if it's just like felt way differently about that group of people, um, like how would they have done what you're saying? Like you think
But
how would they have arrested hundreds and hundreds of people on the spot? Like how would that
okay,
have possibly happened?
but you're just leading me toward what I believe a little further, right? Yes, there wasn't a staff, and I don't believe that there was a staff based on that narrative. Like, oh, these people aren't going to be harmful. They're not going to do bad things. They're just going to protest and be all like, I just think that says a lot. It's not like our government did not know that hundreds of thousands of people were going to be at the Capitol building. They actually knew that already. So it's not like they couldn't have been staffed. I mean, were you around? How old were you in 2001?
11.
You were 11 in 2001. All right. So let's put some context on this. In 2001, I was already serving in the Marine Corps. I was in Marine Security Forces. I know exactly where I was in the moment that 9/11 occurred. And what I can tell you 100% is that within an hour of the first plane hitting the building, our entire unit was up and out of the country, packed, armed, and gone as a response within an hour. So no one can lead me to believe that with all of the information and intel and all the things that we have, that there couldn't have been a more aggressive response to that. Now, you got to get, like, we were out of the country within an hour, and it wasn't just our unit, it was almost like our entire base and other units. So I know that the capabilities of what the military can do, and I know, what private security can do. Like, I'm not someone that's clueless to this, right? So, once again, they already knew that there were going to be hundreds of thousands of people that already had this intention, already, felt a particular way. Like, they know who these people are before they even got there. They just didn't do that. And so it raises the bigger question to me is, why would they allow that to occur, right? And that's a different question, and that gets into more conspiracy stuff. But I know the capabilities of what the military can do from personal experience.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I mean, I guess I would just go back to what we were talking about earlier, which was a vast majority of the BLM protests were handled similarly and weren't extremely violent. I mean, again, there were videos, footage. I know in LA there was footage of like a legit like SWAT team or National Guard or whatever, like fully armed, and there were definitely cases of that. But out of the dozens and dozens of riots going on simultaneously, they weren't handled with that much force. And
I don't want people to be handled poorly, by the way. It's like
I agree. Like, I don't like any major amount of yeah, it what we're talking about obviously is there's a lot of layers to this, but
yeah, for sure. I just think based on someone's actions, what they do and what their intentions are, they should be met with the right response for that. Once again, like, there were hundreds of thousands of people in the Capitol, near the Capitol building, all that. A lot of people were probably there to protest. Now, there's obviously some people that are more on the extreme side, but you got to figure, there were thousands of people that actually went in the building. So that says a lot, that like actually went on the premises with bad intention. So, I don't know what you do. And I definitely feel like the response is going to be long reaching. I'd be very, very shocked if in the future how we hold our elections is actually done the same way. I'm willing to bet it's going to be on the blockchain, and I'm actually for that because we do need transparency and we do need to be able to track what is actually so. That makes sense to me. What we don't need is to be putting people in positions of power that don't have the best of intentions for all of the people in this country. There's a lot of people here of a lot of different backgrounds. It needs how we handle that needs to be completely like revamped and done in a complete different way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree. I don't know how in a democratic republic we can guarantee that will never happen again. And we could go, look through the history of presidents and maybe make some arguments that not every president was for the best interest of all the people, right?
We could make that argument, yeah.
But yeah, I don't disagree. And okay, so we both obviously agree on some non-1776 election system that we have now. Yeah, like I saw the meme of like they can decide like the American Idol winner in an hour, but it takes us like weeks to figure out what's going on in Georgia. Like, what the hell is that? So I agree.
The stakes are higher.
That's part of what created all this tension and animosity too. It was just like night of we knew, or the next morning we knew, but like weeks of just like stories and conspiracies and Trump suing people and like all that stuff. It's just building up, and people. I mean, I will ask you, not that I, and again, I will say anybody that's going to go to Washington D.C. and do that. I mean, the guy that wore the one that's in all the memes, like that guy's from Tampa. Did you know that? Or Bradenton,
no,
I heard. Like,
I would not know that.
Anybody going, he went to USF apparently. Anybody going to D.C. So he flew in, like, and then he's like rallying. Like, this is like the most probably. In many cases, not all, I'm sure there were like some moderates there, but the ones storming the building, I mean, those are some of the more extreme in the country. The typical, what I view as most of the Republican Party, the sweet Christian family that has, dinner every Sunday with their family and goes to church. And, that's not necessarily the crowd that was, there. It's like the really, and again, I'm not saying some of those weren't there, I'm sure, but this is the most extreme in the country. Obviously, flew in. I don't think that's a representation of the Republican Party. And the same for, and I'm doing my best to see this down the middle. And the same for the BLM protests and stuff. Like and like I commented on earlier, a lot of people breaking into buildings and stealing shit were fucking white. Like that's obviously not a representation of the black community as a whole. People breaking in and stealing and stuff like that. So like,
but yeah. The difference though is that people breaking in buildings. If you break in a building and you're white, you will likely get the benefit of the doubt that you just don't have the resources and you're poor. If you break in a building and you steal some shit and you're black, you're going to get the benefit of the doubt that you're a thug and you're a thief and you're this like underhanded character. And that's where the narratives, that's where the power of the narratives gets really weird, and the media has done a really good job of painting us that way, and movies have done a good job of painting us that way. Now, there are a lot of things that incentivize people to like burn themselves, but they don't really realize the impact of like making songs and making all this content to paint a race to be this way. It just doesn't even out. So that's the part of it. Like even I have to catch my own biases. Not like I'm somebody, but like I have to catch my own biases. Like if someone broke in a store, my immediate thought is like, well, their life's probably not awesome.
Yeah, we can agree. Yeah, if they're breaking into a store, they're going through some shit.
They're going through something. Like there's some reason why they feel like the best way that they could spend their time in their life is to run in a Target and grab TVs. Like, you know what I mean? Like, is their life awesome if they're doing that? Probably not. So I think that's a fair bias.
Can So if there's one positive from what just happened is I think almost everybody can agree, and it's not the first time this has been said. We need a more updated like voting process. I mean, if voting ends Tuesday night, like by Wednesday morning, there's no reason the whole country doesn't know, because I think, and again, I'm not excusing it, but when when you have Trump telling people the election is rigged, again, which I don't agree with, and I think that was a very, very poor move on his end. And most credible Republicans have criticized Trump for that, which is good. But constantly saying it's rigged, and then the states not able to put like accurate numbers and final numbers in people's places, and then multiple days go by. You can like understand, okay, people are just like, you have the leader of the country, which again I'm not defending, but leader of the country saying the election is rigged, and then like a week plus goes by and like we still don't even know the numbers, and then like random numbers just like pop in. It's just like, oh, Trump's winning this state, and then like at 3 a.m. 40,000 votes just come in. Like there's no, it's a bad system that could reinforce what he was saying. So
Totally.
I think if there's one positive we can take from this is just come up with a more modern election process and voting process, so we can find out who the winner is and move the fuck on, whoever the new president.
I mean, honestly, I feel, and this is just a feeling, that I feel as though they have kept it that way on purpose, so that things can be done in a weird way. And that's why I say that we need to really have obviously we need to bring some innovation, some technology to it, but like clear transparency between what is happening and what is supposed to be happening, right? Like the voting in this country has been weird a really, really long time. Like, they change the districts and they reroute the districts so that, certain demographics can't go and vote. And then they put like, it's just, then they put a poll station 45 minutes to an hour away in certain areas where they know they're not going to be able to get there because the average person in that community doesn't have a vehicle. Like, there's things that are done to impact votes in lots of different ways. And I just believe that they need to put in place something that is trackable, legitimate, drives transparency, and allows whoever can legally vote in this country to be able to legally vote. That's just what I believe. And in the past, it's been used to sway things up and down, to have some gray room. And you're right. Trump really took advantage of the fact that is that way.
How do you think you talked about the narrative, and I was talking to a buddy yesterday, and I actually do agree with you. There are some even subconscious narratives about if a black person breaks into a store compared to a white person. The example he gave me, which the black person and white person breaking into the store, I don't know if this is the best example because I don't know how much I personally buy that particular one in 2021 of like how they're going to be treated and the reasoning and like why they're doing it. But the one I do agree with that was shared to me yesterday is, you're a single like of an individual girl walking down the street. Two white guys walk past you. You're probably just going to keep walking straight. Two black guys walk past you, you may like veer your walking direction or something like that, right? Or
I don't know why.
Yeah, like white people are just as crazy. Like white people are the serial killers. Yeah, so
and rapists and shit. Like, man,
yeah,
oh
white people are the serial killers. So they may not kill. Yeah, they may not kill you right there on the spot, but they're gonna come to your house. And but why? Like, how do we change that narrative? And in certain cases, I do believe there are like I would say like I know that does happen for sure with the one I just shared. Not completely buying on like the reasoning on like why people break into the store. Like, oh, white person it's okay, black person's not okay. I'm sure any business owner, I'm sure if you and me owned a convenience store together, I want to give two shits who broke in. I'd be like, I want this like asshole arrested,
Right,
and I want
right.
my store back intact, you know. But like, how do we like start making progress to fix the example I gave, in addition to changing the narrative and the feelings that you're having, which the store example you gave, which was a feeling, maybe there's accuracy to it, maybe there's not. Like, how do we change that feeling? Like, what do you have to see so you don't feel that's the case?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Um, Maybe it's a feeling, right? But I've been black my whole life. Just this past Christmas, I remember because I was shopping for my wife, and I'm was going on this Saks Fifth Avenue or whatever, and I remember, walking in, and the security guard really kind of like honing in on the fact that I walked in the store, and I don't have like concern about this, right? Because I can afford to buy stuff in the store. Cool. Okay. But what I noticed for sure was that I walk in, probably 15, 20 white people walk in after me, and it's after I'd only been in for like 2 minutes, right? Security guard smiles at me. I go up the escalator to where all the stuff is, and within a minute of that, the security guard left where they were currently stationed to follow me up the escalator and position themselves somewhere to follow me around the store. Now, that's a regular occurrence. And I just remember feeling, man, how sad is it that someone walks in the store and they're here to like just buy something for their loved ones at Christmas time, and they're just so happy that they have the ability to do that, and now they're like being guarded against to make sure I'm not stealing. And the security guard walks up and they act like they're shifting the clothes near me and watching what I'm doing. And it was just like it's a ridiculous thing, but it's a regular thing. So to ask the question, like, how do we change that? I don't know. By the way, the security guard was also black. And I think that says a lot too, right? Because when you start controlling narratives, you also paint for other people a lot of different things too, even people that look just like you. So she may have believed I was in the store to do some underhanded thing or whatever, just based on all of the content and all the things that are said and how people are perceived and all this kind of stuff over years of conditioning. So I don't know what the answer to that is. But what I know for sure is that I'm much more interested in actually having real conversations about it, even if they're feelings and they don't have data, how people perceive things, because I think it gives you a window into, their world. Like me and you can talk about whatever, I'm not concerned about anything. Like we talk about anything, any subject matter is on the table, and I won't be assessing and judging you from that's a white guy's perspective, and maybe it is. But I think when you start to close the distance and start building and forming relationships, the narrative organically starts to change. Now, obviously, there's things we need to do. We need to change how we talk about ourselves. We need to change how we think about ourselves. And maybe you need to change how we dress. I have a buddy that I hung out with, near New Year's, and, his pants are sagging down, his ass is hanging out. And I'm thinking, like, dude, pull up your pants.
Don't talk about
right?
me like that, dude.
No, but I know, but not even from like a policing, like, oh man, you should be acting like this. It's just more of like people aren't necessarily walking around with this conscious awareness of how they're painting other perceptions to other people. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think it's going to take a lot of work. That's the short answer.
Yeah. And feelings are great, and I'm glad we can talk about those feelings, because I guess that's why, like, I was curious, like, what could change that feeling. And it's something I've also been working on, because I shared an example, a friend of mine, I was like, I feel this is happening to the Conservative Party. He's like, well, do you have any data? And I was like, oh, well, maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't have that much data, as much as I thought. So
yeah.
As long as we're acknowledging it's a feeling and not a fact, I think that's like a step, so we can at least be like, I feel this way. So like, how can I, as a white guy, like, maybe I not that I could just make a huge difference in your life and how you're feeling, but maybe I can.
Go
I
for
don't
it.
know. How can I help you not feel that way, right? Or how can listeners of this show help you as a black man not feel a certain way? So just acknowledging their feelings and myself too. I think that's important. So I have a question for you, because I think one thing that gets tricky about discussing racism is there are many definitions of racism, and I brought up two, and I talked about something on with Max on my episode last week, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I have a feeling you may not agree with me completely, but that's okay because we're going to talk about it. So I have
Wait. But before you go into that, I just want to say something real quick. Um, I feel unstoppable. Not like I can't be killed, but I feel as though my experience walking through the world, like I don't care what any stereotypes are. Like, I don't care what people think of black people. I mean, I do, like, I want it to be better. Not like I don't care, but I mean, I don't feel limited by any of those things. I do feel as though I can be the kind of person that walks through the world completely differently. And also for context, I have lived in other countries. I've lived in other places, so I know what it feels like to be perceived as a whole one way. Like when I lived in Europe, I might as well have forgot I was black. It wasn't actually, let me rephrase that. I was reminded of how beautiful it is to have a difference than other people. Because in where I was living there, it was celebrated. And that was a distinction. So by the time I came back to the States, it almost felt as though the American version of blackness was placed upon me again, and I didn't have the same experience of being celebrated, loved, and appreciated. So how do we change that? Well, I think we change that by, for one, just stepping up our game of being better human beings and having hard conversations, being interested and curious, and really diving in, whether it sounds the right way or things come out in a way that are politically correct or not or whatever. But like building those real relationships, I think close the distance.
Yeah, I agree. Being a better human. That's I think if we just look at it at a macro level, we could just all focus on that. A lot of these issues will just improve as a byproduct.
Yeah, bro.
For sure. So thank you for sharing that. I don't know if anybody has ever Googled the definition of racism. I don't know if you ever have. LaShawn, have you?
If I have, I haven't recently. So go for
So
it.
I have two definitions of racism. The first Oxford English Dictionary version in 1989, which is interesting. So that was only a term in 1989, which I didn't even know until I looked this up before the show.
Shocker.
But the modern version, they're two different things. So I think when we're talking about racism, a lot of people have different interpretations of what that word means, right? So the original version is the Oxford definition: the theory that distinctive human characteristics and abilities are determined by race. The same dictionary termed racism as a belief in the superiority of a particular race. So that's more for like white supremacy, like I'm a superior race because, or you're an inferior race and stuff like that. That type of thinking, and again, this is the old definition. We'll go to the new definition here in a bit. I think that thinking is very, very rare. 5% of the country or less, I think, truly believes that they're, of all races, believes that they're a superior race for whatever reason, and
Do you have
another
data
race
to back
isn't.
that up?
I don't. That's a feeling.
Let's get some data on that because
Yeah.
I'm actually interested in
On
what
that one, because we're going to talk about the modern definition, which I think applies to almost all Americans, which is interesting because it's a very broad definition what modern racism is, or modern definition of racism is. But that truly believes their race is better race. Like you think white people believe, like, not that like, hey, I'm judging this person, which again we'll dive into the modern definition here in a bit, but that I think my race is superior. I think that's a very, very small percentage of the country. What do you think about that?
Yeah, great question. This one feels like a landmine. So I'll answer this. Um, I'll answer this. So I feel like there are a lot of things in place that are subconscious, even, you know, that I don't think maybe most white people are walking around overtly like I'm better than you and you should bow before me type of thing. But once again, like we were talking about narratives and we're talking about the power of information and content, over time, you know, you got to look at almost all of the celebrated people in in my lifetime have been mostly all white people. And I do think that that says a lot subconsciously to people. Like we have one black president, and I think that's awesome. He was a dope guy. He is. But you got to figure like all the heroes in most of the movies. Now there are some outliers, you know, Blade and Black Panther and things like that. But all the heroes, all the inventors, all the how people perceive doctors, like all of that has been, you know, kind of like a culmination of the same narrative that white is right and it is better in all ways. Now, except for sports and music.
Maybe fashion too.
In fashion.
So okay, well,
style.
All right, but there you go. So that's by the way,
those things,
yeah.
But those things are like sub-level things.
Those are big parts of our culture, though. I mean, I wouldn't
huge.
discount that. I mean, I would say that the black
they're huge, huge parts of our culture. I'm not discounting it, but what I'm saying is there's a real difference between like growing up and believing the only way that you can be successful is if you can go out and dance and sing a song for someone or shoot a ball. Like, or dude, be a drug dealer. Like, you know what I mean? Like that was kind of the narrative from like my entire upbringing is like, those are the choices. You're going to do some music, you're going to dance, you're going to shoot a ball. That's it. You know what I mean? Like everything else is like, well, maybe you'll, you know, work for someone someday and that kind of thing. And I think it's very different from a cultural standpoint, what it says for other people. Now, for me personally, I feel like it highlights how black people need to really shift things, how they need to do better in a lot of ways, right? You know, they just need to do better, you know, because there's a lot to cover for. But I do think that most of the input that most people get as a white person, I've never been a white person, but this is my perception of it. I do believe that most of the input says you're better. Period. That's just kind of what it, like it's would you say that it just says that, man, in so many different ways, in education and just once again, like I feel like I can do anything that I want to do in my life. I don't feel like there is anything that is going to stop me from doing that. I'm not concerned about who has something or who knows more than me or who's faster than me, stronger than me, has more money than me. Those things, I feel as though I am capable of closing the distance regardless of what my considerations are, race, anything. So for me, those are non-factors. But I do believe for most people, like when I was a kid, they were telling me I was going to be dead by 25. 25. As a matter of fact, like you'll be dead by 25. That was like a regular thing teachers would say. You know, so I think it's just different, bro. Like it is different. And also like there's plenty of white people that aren't going to do shit with their whiteness. Even if it gives them an access point, you know, or whatever.
So I appreciate sharing. By the way, and I forgot and this is my fault on the video. If anybody's watching it on video, where your face is at now is perfect. but because it shrinks in on the sides for the actual recording we're doing.
Oh, I
When
leaned
you
out.
when you lean out, yeah. So if people watch that clip, they'll see like your eye and like half of your nose and stuff.
I'll come back, guys. I promise.
Okay, no, all good. What you're saying, I believe, and this shouldn't be controversial, but I feel like it may. In 2021, like anybody from any skin color can accomplish literally anything they want. Race, religion, skin color, and I would even argue that it's popular to not be white in 2021, and it can give you some advantages that white people don't have.
Yeah, in 2021, yeah, that may be the case.
Do you agree in some cases that that's true? Like if it was black guy and a white guy applying to be a salesperson, same role at a company, and with companies with all the pressure to be diverse, and especially Fortune 500 companies have now like presidents of diversity and like that type of, like, couldn't you argue that like a company is more compelled to hire the non-white person in 2021 and has like benefits from, and a lot of different benefits for that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think it benefits them to have tokens to show that they're more diverse, even if they're not really. At least the appearance of looking that way is valuable. So yeah, I do think that could get someone a job or get someone an opportunity and all those kinds of things. Like, yeah, certainly.
Yeah, and you talked on the growing up black, believing you can be successful. I think you said dancing and singing a song. Those were your words. But
sing and dance for me, clap, perform for me. Yeah.
Would you say like part of that is class too? Because like where I grew up, a lot of low income white people. We talked about this on our first, your first time on the show. I don't think any of them ever believe or were told they can be a doctor or a business owner. They felt maybe not the music or athlete path for them, but definitely working some job, like just this is you're gonna be what you're gonna do. You're gonna get a job here and work your way up, and hopefully you're gonna be able to pay your bills. And I would say like the drug dealing thing. There's probably some. It's probably maybe not as like vocalized, and it's not as like well known, but I feel like there's a lot of drug dealers in the super low income white community too. So I feel like that's a pretty.
But they're not perceived as that, which
maybe.
is the difference.
Okay.
They're just perceived as people that are doing what they need to do to get by because they don't have the opportunities in the trailer park. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, when you say perceived, I thought of something a little bit different, but I don't view it. I view it like, and I feel like most people view drug dealing as the same exact thing, which by the way, I think all drugs should be legalized. I've talked about that. That's where I don't, thing I don't agree with on conservatives. Yeah, it'd get a lot of people out of prison. It'd actually save a lot of government spending too. But
then it would mess up, the private prison business, and that would be bad.
Which the private prison business funds Democrats and Republicans. So that's why both of these parties, even though conservatives may on a principle level think it's a bad idea, so they happily take the money. Democrats happily take the money, even though principally they probably disagree with it because they love taking the money.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that says a lot about our leadership, right? And that just kind of leads to what I'm saying earlier. We've got to be better about what our processes are for having people in those kinds of positions of power.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I don't know if you saw, but Andrew Yang announced he's going to run for mayor of New York City. Did you see that?
Love it. He's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, he's a Democrat. Like, there's like a Tulsi Gabbard, a Andrew Yang. Like, I was a Gary Johnson guy in 2016. Like, these guys that just, they're not popular by the masses, which is just mind-boggling. But I'm hoping they get more popularity, that just have their own ideas. Like, they have to identify as something just because that's how our party system works. But they're not like cookie cutter. I am a Democrat and this is what I believe. And they just argue over who's more of a Democrat or who's more of a conservative, which is like, I figure what the debates are now. It's like, well, you're gonna you're gonna give more people guns. Well, we're gonna like give more guns. And then like the Democratic debate, I don't know if you like, they argued over like who's gonna have a more open border. Like one's like, hey, yeah, we're gonna have an open border, and they're like, we're gonna have an open border and give them health benefits. It's just like, it's like they all just like they're talking the same stuff. But
Hey, I wanna actually circle back on something if it's okay with you.
yeah, of course.
Because I want to make sure I don't miss this opportunity. So when I was talking about the power of music and like narratives and movies and all those kinds of things, and I was saying, hey man, if you could dance or sing in your neighborhood, maybe you're good, or play with a ball. Um, I think there's something really special about the power of music, though, as it relates to like auditory, voices and even just energy and frequency and all those kinds of things. I believe that it communicates so much more about who we are to others in a way that they understand. And so I do believe that there's something special about how we leverage and wield our frequency through music and through language and through auditory forms, right? And I do think it's a great honor if you're able to do that to communicate really powerful, uplifting things. I'm just saying that when I was growing up, it appeared as though there were very few opportunities. I had the benefit of being born to someone who just had larger than life views about what's possible that didn't make any sense for where she came from, and luckily I was able to grasp some of that and internalize it and then fuel it myself. So I do think it's beautiful what's happening in the world right now in terms of music and how people it is bringing people together, as you can see like on TikTok, and there's like all this like cultural music and like applied to just regular everyday things, and everyone's kind of like celebrating it. I think that's amazing, and it's creating a runway for the future of how we can be closer as humans, right? So I think that's a really special thing. So I don't want to minimize that, but I was just saying that growing up, the opportunities were few. Like my mornings were, instead of like hearing birds chirping, we heard gunshots every morning and night. You know what I mean? So it's like, this is different.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So just to go back to the initial question I asked, you said subconsciously there could be more of this superiority, which maybe is the case, which if it's deep rooted subconscious belief, I mean, it's probably, if it can ever be fixed in their lifetime, it's going to take probably mental health professionals reading books, having a lot of conversations with people you don't agree with. That's the only hope that has. So I can't say from a subconscious level. That's obviously a really, really hard thing to identify. But at a conscious level, I feel a very small percentage of the country truly believes that their race is a superior race to another race. Like,
I mean, it's hard.
They go to bed at night thinking like, I'm white, I'm better than all these other races, or even on the other end, I'm black, I'm better than this Indian race, I'm Asian, I'm better than white people. Like, you think people consciously feel that way, a large percentage of the country?
Yeah, I do believe that. I definitely believe that black people feel like they're generally faster, stronger, more skilled, and more creative and more artistic. I play sports better, do music better. I genuinely believe that most black people believe that. And there's a lot to say that there may not be wrong, right? So.
Definitely on the athletic side. I mean, there's no doubt that like the NBA probably wouldn't be as exciting if it was a bunch of guys like
do you want to race me? Yeah. Do you want to have? We can have.
We should. That'll be the third time you're on.
And I think you'll shock. I think you'll be shocked.
Okay.
I don't run a lot, but if I do, it's pretty fast.
No, for sure. But like, I believe not. So that what you're saying is a little different than what I'm asking. So better at a particular skill. I don't think that's saying that your race is superior. Like, hey, I'm just better at this thing, so than this. But not that like we're the superior race. Like we're like God's gift to Earth, and this race is not.
Well, here's what I believe. I believe that the idea of white supremacy and things like that has been a manufactured thing that has been embedded into many, I don't want to say most, but many white households throughout the country. It's just been embedded now. And so, for example, like if I go in a store, or if I go somewhere, the average white person expects me to open and hold the door for them, or to move myself out of their way, or to not respond as candidly as I would naturally respond to something. Now, they don't know if I just met them, they probably know very little about me. They don't know I came from a rugged background. They don't know I'm a Marine, I'm an entrepreneur, and all these kinds of things. So that impacts how I would respond to things. And I'm just kind of wild in general. But like the average person expects me to kind of, in a way, white person, by the way, tuck myself under to appear more nice or more safe, or, you know what I mean, non-threatening.
Why do you
I'm
feel,
none of those things.
Why do you feel like, I guess that, so what you're saying right now, and maybe this is the case, I can't deny how you're feeling, but how can we help you not feel that way? What you're saying, because I again, and this is where you can maybe help me learn this, in 2021, and again, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, and like my number of 5%, by the way, that feels their superior race, that's still 15 to 20 million Americans. I mean, it's a lot of people, but it's not a majority of the country.
Not out of 330.
No. That's where my number comes from, is there's still millions of Americans, I truly believe, in 2021 feel that way. I just don't think it's a very large percentage. But what you're talking about,
it's popular. It's not popular to go around with views like that. Like I'm better than you because I'm white, or I'm better than you because I'm something. But I do think that so much of the things that have painted this perception over time say that for people.
Yeah.
And it's tough for someone to know it if their life has been that way. Just like if I were to, look into the sky looks blue. Okay, but that doesn't necessarily make it blue. But if it appears blue to me, it's just that way. It's just matter of fact in that way. I'll give you an example. Like, I don't know if I told you this before, but my wife has gone her whole entire life believing that police are there to keep you safe, because she's a white lady. She's blonde with blue hair. Excuse me. She's blonde with blue eyes. Her hair's not blue right now. But anyways, she's gone her whole life believing that police are there to keep you safe. It has never, ever been in question, not one time, until we were together, which that changed dramatically. And now she literally walks around concerned that they're going to harm her or me because we're together. Like when we drove across the country to California, she literally wanted me to hide and her to drive, past Louisiana and, in all those southern states, so it's like, it is a thing. The first time she's ever been arrested or had any negative problem with police, and she's had run-ins, are because she was with me, and so to answer your question, what can anyone do to make me feel whatever about it? I don't think it's important for me to particularly feel any way about it, because I have the perception that people are doing the best that they can with how they perceive the world and what's in front of them, like what they turn it into. Like, I don't feel like most people are intending to harm others, either with their views or their intentions and all that. I don't feel like that's the case. But there are things in place that just paint the perception for others that may end up being subconscious. And what can you do about that? I don't know. I just show up and just love on people. I show up and have hard conversations. I show up and have fun conversations. I show up and I'm interested and curious, and I want to build and I want to support whatever they're up to, and I have excitement for that, and I have love for them. Like, that's the kind of person I show up as. So I don't think it's really important for anyone to help me feel better about it, because I just don't think it's important for me in general to just feel better about things that don't feel good, And also, if I'm seeing things in a way that just aren't accurate. I understand that I have filters on certain ways that I walk through life in. Maybe some of those filters will change over time, and some of those filters may not. But in general, I feel as though people are just trying to create a better life for themselves. And fear is a big thing for a lot of people, which I don't use as a filter that stops me from interacting with people or building relationships.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I like know we can't like help each individual person feel better about every little thing in their lives. Sometimes it's just okay to feel bad about things, or like that's just part of being a human. But some of the stuff you're saying are things I've heard obviously in the media, things I've heard from other non-white friends of mine, and it's just like what has to happen where like these feelings don't come up as much as they're coming up. Like, what would you have to see to like not feel the way about police that you do? You know what I mean? Like, have you ever thought about that?
To not feel the way about police that I do. I don't know, bro. Like, here's the real truth of it. I think that policing in this country needs to be completely revamped. There's no reason why an 18-year-old in the military can not shoot someone in a heated scenario, and a fully grown police officer can't because they're scared they're not going to make it home or whatever. It is a hazardous job. By the way, I'm not interested in being a police officer, and I do have friends that are police officers that are also former military, right? So I hope that they do their job better. Maybe they don't. But I do believe that the culture of policing needs some real attention. And once again, I've lived in other countries, and the experience of them having police officers wasn't the same. I've been pulled over in Italy. I didn't have the experience that I was about to be murdered. I had interacted with plenty of cops in France or in Spain. I didn't have the experience that, I was about to be treated unfairly. So I think there's a culture of policing here that is just done poorly. And it needs, not only with just training, but once again, the culture and how it's perceived. Like, all of those things need some real attention and care. And I think until that happens, police are going to be viewed in that way by a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think we may have talked about this in our first convo, but where I do agree on some police reform is their job duties are way too vast. They're helping school children cross, and then they're going to break up a domestic dispute, and then they're arresting a drug dealer, like all in the same day. Like, it's a very vast pulling people over for speeding tickets. To finish out the night. It's a lot of things for one person to do for not like, regardless of the salary, but they're not like extremely well paid either. Like, not the salary like is irrelevant, but it in most cases, but at least if it was
no, it's actually extremely relevant because
I meant from a focus standpoint, but I would
Gotcha.
say the only thing where the salary is relevant is maybe like relevant. I don't know. The Revenant, by the way, is a great movie. I just rewatched
Revenant's
that.
great.
Yeah. I would recommend that. But I actually did just rewatch it on Amazon Prime like 2 weeks ago, so that may be why that's in my mind. But like, it may attract better talent, the higher pay, right? So I think a restructure of, and again, another reason why I'm for legalization of drugs, having legitimate police officers, and maybe they come up with a different name. Maybe police is for like non-violent stuff, and there's maybe like a like more specific roles. Some people are just focused on helping the kids cross the street, but
I don't want no police near my kids. You understand it, like the narrative here? Like, I don't want
how. But I guess like I have just like a lot of thoughts in my mind. It's hard to put it on the words. You have police officers specifically trained for specific interactions, I think, is a first step. Like, maybe entry level, like that's all the police are trained to do is, and I know that's kind of how the system works now, but maybe that's all they're doing is helping kids cross. And then once they get to a point, they're like specifically trained in de-escalating, and that's all their training is focused, and that's kind of like all they're dispersed to do. And then there's another class of officers that's only focusing on pulling people over and giving speed tickets and dealing with like traffic stuff, like making their roles more defined, so the training can be more specific and they can be more prepared for that specific thing. You know what I mean? But like they're just doing like tons of shit right now, and I'm not defending. Obviously, I'm not defending like, you know, blatant crimes, but their job duties are pretty wide and they're underpaid, and it's a recipe for disaster and low quality of work output.
It is, but those are all like valid, important issues, you know, for sure. Like they're doing too much in too many areas, probably not very qualified and psychological anything, and giving people therapy. Like, you know, I don't want them guarding my kids or crossing the anythings. Like, I don't think they need to be chasing people down to give them tickets. We have technology for that. Like, agreed. But I think the real problem with police in America is that for black and brown people, it's almost like the equivalent of Nazis coming to protect us. That's not a thing. You know what I'm saying? So it's going to be really difficult to like repaint what the police do and all that kind of stuff, because they've done so much horrible shit over such a long period of time that I don't know that they'll ever be able to repaint that narrative. They need to have different people, either assigned by government workers or whatever, that do these specific things. Like you said, they definitely need care. There's no reason why anyone should ever be arrested for being homeless or being a drug addict or something like that. They need care. So they should get care from proper professionals in a lot of different ways. But I just feel like it's going to be really difficult to, you know, ever change the culture of policing, because it's very much like that, you know, them hunting people. That's our experience. You know, it's like a Nazi force walking around, you know, harassing people as domestic terrorists. And, you know, I don't know that they're ever going to be able to do anything about that. Now, do I think that they should like not have police officers? I think there's a reason why we have people that are trying to guard our communities. Right. But I think there's better ways that can be done.
So there's nothing that can be done because, again, I know you've shared some poor experiences you've had in the past, but the data does show that violent crime has gone down tremendously over the last 30 years. Thus, police interactions have gone down tremendously, at least police interactions that involve violent crime, which are typically most likely to end in some negative altercation. I don't know. You know, speeding ticket stops have gone up, but I know violent crime's gone way down. Thus,
yeah, what happened 30 years ago?
Well, there's lots of theories on why the decline started 30 years ago. There's I read this book called Freakonomics about this, and there's government people that, you know, presidents that take credit for it, etc. The one that makes the most sense to me, and again, this is where, you know, another thing like I'm pretty progressive on, is it was
cell phones?
No,
technology.
It was about 18 years after Roe v. Wade. So when you have a bunch of women that have a safe option to, you know, not have a child, that's probably going to be brought up in most cases, brought up in a low-income family with maybe not a lot of love and attention, thus more likely to commit crime, right? So that's the best theory that I've heard. But regardless, violent crime has gone down tremendously over the last 30 years. You can Google this data because I spent a few hours one day looking at this. But that's the best theory I've heard, and that's not that some government policy sprinkled in there hasn't helped as well or whatever, and just maybe cell phones and modern technology, people are, you know, just getting friendlier.
It's definitely not out of the kindness of their heart, right? Maybe people are getting friendlier. I don't know.
People, I think, are just getting a little more accepting, and we talked about this the other night. Like, I think that we're making a ton of progress. Not that there's not room to go, but I think we're making a ton of progress in racial relations, and the amount of what I look at data points to support that is the amount of you know, non-white CEOs of Fortune 500 companies compared to decades ago. Interracial marriages, similar to those like you're in, are at an all-time high. So it shows people are getting along more. But anyway, police interactions and a violent nature have gone down tremendously as well. And I know we talked about this on the last conversation that we recorded, because we have tons of conversations in between. So in my mind, I'm trying to distinguish which ones we've had online and offline.
Which one did we record?
Which ones did we have like a mic in front of our face? So this one, I think, Washington Post had an article where it's about 1,000 people a year are killed by cops. A vast majority of them are armed. About 50 of them were unarmed, and I think like 10 or 15 were black. Like a higher, 15 or 20 were white. Nothing, but about 50 unarmed deaths by police officers in 2019. Which, if you look at that data, it's like, and I'm like, you used the word hunting, and I remember specifically you used the word hunting last time. That doesn't really suggest to me that like police officers are just like hunting black men in the streets. That that amount, 1,000 total deaths, and that's about the annual average, give or take, about 1,000 people a year. A vast majority are considered armed at some level. So if you just look at like hunting in the streets, you could maybe look at the unarmed deaths, and the data just doesn't support it. And Wash Post is obviously pretty, if there are credible media sources, they would be considered one. And they're also a left-leaning one. So I'm curious, like when I hear words like hunting, I'm just like, the data doesn't really support that, at least from a killing standpoint. Maybe not a treatment standpoint, but a killing standpoint.
Shooting standpoint, which is different. Like we talked about the other day, like I think data is definitely important, in a lot of cases it is missing context, poor behavior, a culture of poor behavior toward a certain demographic, like, is poor behavior, and it may not even go to the point of murder, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't go to the point of high degrees of injury or rape or situations where you're just kind of locked away or tormented in a way. Like, those things don't get reported, but they happen all the time. And I know from my own personal experience from some of those things, like that would never show up on a statistic, and it wouldn't necessarily show up on a camera or a recording or something like that. But that doesn't say anything about what's happening or not, So, like I said, I think that there needs to be some real major reform in what policing is, and they probably even need to change the term and get all new people to do this job. Right?
Rebrand them, yeah, like get a branding expert,
100%,
get like
100%.
Apple's branding team to come in.
Police to me are Nazi. They're the same. They're the same. And matter of fact, there's a lot of Nazis in the police force, right? So they're the same. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot of work to be done, and there are some data points and statistics that say certain things, but there's a lot of things they don't say. They don't say that in the state of Florida that, they build prisons off of low-performing third graders, and there's actual data for that. What's the difference? You know what I'm saying? So
you said hunt, so like I guess like when you use words like hunting, that's implying killing. So I would just like extreme words like that, and this is where I've been like critical of like LeBron, and I was talking to a buddy yesterday, and LeBron has done a lot of great things, like especially what he's doing in Ohio. Sure. So I want to give him credit for that. But like when words are like, I could get hunted in the street, like words like hunted, it basically implies killed. I think that's a synonym on some level. That seems to be treated misfairly. Let
me ask you this. I don't want to cut you. But I do. Have you ever had any encounters in your life where police have drawn weapons on you?
No. I will say they have not. I have been when I was 17 and 18. I had a Honda Civic Tuner with like loud exhaust. I think we may, again, I'm just gonna stop saying I think we may have covered this because we probably did. But I got pulled over a ton in those. I had, multiple cops come up to me where they would come like on both sides. I've had that like a couple times. I've had, but yeah.
Do you know why you got pulled over a ton?
I looked suspicious in my tuner.
Did you do anything suspicious in your tuner?
Not really. Just the look.
Just driving
Maybe
fast.
maybe
and
they
looking?
assumed I was some non-friendly guy. Yeah.
Got it. So let's say that they thought you might have been a non-friendly guy. Do you remember what your experience was like when you got pulled over? Did you feel as though your life was threatened?
Not life was threatened. I never had a gun pulled, but I definitely had occasions where I felt it was abuse of power and force, and I just felt like they definitely were like power tripping, and it wasn't a pleasant interaction.
Got it. Yeah, they're just not pleasant.
Yeah,
when it comes to
yeah.
that.
But to your point, I haven't had a gun pulled on me.
So imagine this. I've never had a scenario like that where I didn't get a gun pulled on me almost. You see what the difference is? Like, so it
You've got a
definitely
gun pulled on you every time you've been pulled over?
almost every single time.
When was the last time this happened?
The last time I got pulled over, I was in Sarasota. Yeah, and actually, I didn't get the gun pulled on me that time because I had plenty of white people in the car. You know, and it was interesting because they almost worked as a buffer for me. But for sure, I've never been pulled over by myself or with other people of color without having a gun pulled on me. So you got to get like it's a complete different experience, bro. When you're a person of color in the country and you have any interactions with police, it is definitely the experience that your freedom is immediately in question and possibly your life.
I mean, that's a much different experience than me. And I mean, if that is the case for you, I agree. That's definitely something that should be addressed.
Well, that's why I say the culture of
I
policing.
mean, why if that like and again, and I'm not saying data is everything, but I do think it's a lot, especially for rational people that don't have your exact viewpoint or maybe having a hard time understand, right? Again, there's going to be extremes on both sides no matter what data you put in front of them. They're going to be like, don't believe it. You know, like that's not but the rational
like that.
The rational
like that.
person,
there's context, you know.
The rational person, it's just like, okay, debt seems to be going down, but a lot of guns are drawn. Like, why? I guess like why isn't there more supporting data for that stuff if it's so common? You know, I feel like if I saw stuff like that, it would, because it's one thing to hear feelings and stuff like that, and which I take into consideration. Which like a lot of your stuff is from personal experience, so it helps shift my perspective, which is good. But it's another thing to like see studies and stuff, and it's like I can't deny this, that most of America can't deny this. So I guess like why like that particular one, like guns drawn or like stuff like that. I mean that's a big deal. Like I can't imagine like that going through that regularly. Like
it's a huge deal. Yeah. I think I would love to challenge you to get some data points on that particular thing if you can find any, because it is a huge deal, and it has a lot to do with why people have the experience that like their life is now in danger, versus like did they commit some kind of like low level infraction? I went too fast, or my music was too loud in my Honda tuner, or like that's almost a death sentence, so. I definitely feel like...
Well, not a death sentence. The data doesn't support that. But maybe a gun drawn.
Okay, but a gun drawn...
but, like, I'm just kind of being, like, making humor out of this. But, yeah, I mean, death sentence, hunting, stuff like that. I mean, these are... I know you've had bad experience. I mean, these are...
No, you're right. We have to be careful with our words,
yeah.
right? I agree with that. But what I am saying is that a gun drawn is intent, right? There's only one stage beyond that could end your life. And if that's happening for low-level infractions on a regular basis, which it does, that says a lot about the conduct and how police view their professionalism, and so there really needs to be something done about that. I've had so many. First of all, you got to get it. I'm not a criminal. I'm not. I'm as clean cut as it gets. I don't drink. I've never even had a drink in my life. I don't smoke. I've never had weed in my life. I've never had any drugs in my life. I'm a military veteran. I'm a father. I'm a business owner. I'm like as clean
You
cut
pay
as it gets.
taxes, you
All the
employ
things,
people. Yeah.
all the things. I had like, there's no, I'm about as clean cut as a person would get, and then almost every interaction I have with a police officer gets escalated to that point for absolutely no reason. Now, granted, I'm dangerous. I'm a Marine. I have weapons. I know how to use them. I'm very capable without weapons.
Yeah.
Right. And so I get that. And my demeanor doesn't say that I'm fearful of people, which I'm just not. Right. So maybe that has something to do with how I'm responded to, but I don't think so, because I'm professional and I can have a clear conversation of my intentions and whatever and talk it out. But like it's just the way it goes often, way too often, and it escalates farther than that way too often,
So I agree that that is a big problem. Assuming that there is, like, if that's a legitimate issue, which I mean, based on what you're saying, it is, like, guns being drawn, like, that's a pretty big deal. Like, I couldn't imagine just, like, you wouldn't want anybody you care about or love or to just, like, even if they're not, like, getting shot, but, like, your daughter goes and she's, just got her car and she's driving, and it's like, that could be traumatic even if nothing
Exactly.
happens. Like, a gun gets pulled on her. So I agree that's a really big deal. And
Sure.
so I want to go to the modern definition of racism. Okay, this is what Google says racism is, which is, I think, what along the lines of what most people perceive, but it's a pretty broad definition, and I think based on this, you could say almost everybody is racist at some level. Prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is minority or marginalized. So, and I'll read that one more time. Definition of racism per Google in 2021. Prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is minority or marginalized, which I don't even like that last statement, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. Why couldn't they just said, like, prejudice against any, like, but I mean, prejudice in itself, okay? If I went through a phase, like, I think Hispanic women are really beautiful, right? If I assumed that Hispanic woman I was dating, like, I'm like, their family probably makes the best dinners, and I'm sure the mom is, like, the most amazing, like, cook, and they just make which is, like, from my experience, like, the food was a lot better than, like, white people food. Like, that's a form of prejudice, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Like, I guess, like, that's, so, again, like, where we're at in racism is, like, any form of prejudice per the updated version of racism is racism. So, like, even if it's, like, a good thing, I suppose, prejudice, which, here, let me bring up the definition of prejudice. And I think the actual definition is really important, because we say this word all the time, but it's like, what is the actual definition of this word? Because I think, until I looked this up, I didn't know that, like, prejudice, preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. So prejudice doesn't have to be bad. If I said, LaShawn, you're probably better at this than me, like, it could be like a compliment, it could be a good thing, but that's a form of prejudice, thus me being racist by this definition. So
Yeah, maybe. I mean, certain words have negative connotations by their previous association, and so there's probably other word choices that would be better in that scenario. Like, I like the word bias, because, yeah, I think Spanish people dance good and they have good food and the people are beautiful and all those kinds of things.
happy.
happy,
loud.
family oriented, maybe loud. Yeah, I have Spanish neighbors. They're
We're
loud as
we're
shit.
both very racist
Um,
because we don't like no based on this definition. And again, I'm not trying to be funny. I'm just saying like the definition has, and I gave the 30-year ago definition and
yeah,
the modern definition, and it's really evolved. So I'm just saying like any form of prejudice per the modern definition is racism. So I agree. Like racism is it's a broad word. Bias maybe a better
who
word.
gets to say? Like, who gets to fucking say? That that's racism because I don't know.
You
I
thinking you could beat me in a race, LaShawn? I mean, you
thinking, dude.
based on prejudice, preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. You
I
haven't.
never, I never said I would beat you in the race. I said you'd be shocked.
You implied you would beat me though,
I did.
not based on reason or
I
actual
would
experience.
smoke you in a race.
So that was prejudice,
It totally biased.
thus racist. So
My
I'm just
my experiences. I've run a lot in my lifetime. I was states and track, and I've got records of running.
yeah.
In the military.
You probably would
marathons,
beat
things
me.
like that.
I'm not
I
gonna
think I
deny
could.
that.
I think I could run. That's all I'm saying. And yeah, I do
So-
think I could beat most people in running.
Where do we draw the line? And this, I think, like comedians can kind of get away with it. They're one of the few that can. Where do we draw the line at, like, what is okay to say? Like, because if I, like, there's differences. We can point out differences in different communities and cultures and races without necessarily saying that, like, one is inferior or superior. You know what I mean? It's just like, hey,
Totally. Yeah, we
like,
can celebrate our differences.
so, like,
Why not?
how do we get to that point where it's just like, we're allowed to say certain things about like certain races without it necessarily being like a bad thing all the time too, and it being like
To be fair, that's a white people problem. I don't have that problem at all. Matter of fact, I don't know any people of any other races that have that problem. So for me, I have total comfort in saying what I think about any race, black, white, brown, Spanish. I don't have any inhibitions about that. I don't feel concerned that people are going to perceive me as a racist or any of that kind of stuff. So I just say what there is to say and what I think about it. I might not offer my opinion, but if I do, I'm not concerned about being perceived as a racist about it. But I do think that has a lot to do with like how I feel internally about people too. I don't feel that anyone is inferior to me, and I don't feel anyone is superior to me. So when I'm talking with someone or I'm celebrating some attribute of people, or even like I feel bad about some attribute of how people function, I never had the concern that it's a racist view.
yeah.
Because generally, I love people. I don't like all the shit they do.
I agree with that. I do get the feeling that you love people. No factual data to support that. No, I'm just kidding. I agree. I agree with that. So I guess maybe that is a white people problem. How can we make it so, again, for us all to intermingle and be loving, like I know we have the potential to do? Like, can I like we should be able to like talk about different things in different like from different experiences and stuff without it necessarily being like an insult or a bad thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, but I think you have to have the courageousness to do so, regardless of if you're concerned if people are going to think you're racist. Like, there's tons of things that me and you talk about. Hopefully, we've created a dynamic that doesn't have you concerned that if you say something that doesn't land quite the way and it wasn't as scripted, that we can't talk about it. We can talk about it, right? And I think that building the right relationships in general need to be fueled by direct communication, and I think that makes a difference. Like, you can talk to me about whatever. It could be race, it could be family, it could be business, it could be a game. It doesn't really matter. But I think that most people are concerned that they can't have the right conversations without sounding a particular way, and that calls for some level of courageousness and vulnerability.
Do you think that, let me see how I can word this question. Well, no, because it's you'll see when I ask it. Like, who? Like, is it the white people that need to take the lead on these conversations? Is it the non-white people? Is it just like everybody that has the courage to have the conversations needs to do it regardless of like, is that where we're at? Like, who is there somebody that should take the lead? Is it just like,
I don't know if it's a matter of like taking the lead. I definitely feel like this is an individual endeavor. In order for us to continue to grow, we need to have a better understanding of our neighbors and our people, and we need to have better relationships with them. You know, that is a function of communication. So I don't know if it's a matter of like take the lead. I think we're taking the lead by having to talk about it on video and letting other people hear it. Is that not taking the lead?
no,
I don't know. I don't like the language "take the lead" because it's like
but
you're
like
taking the lead, and versus like showing up and participating in something that
showing
can
initiative. Okay.
yeah, like just opening the opportunity to connect deeper.
For example, so I, have this podcast, so it's, really simple for me to just be like, hey, you want to come on here and talk about stuff, even though we don't agree on certain things. And, podcasts are a great medium for that, by the way. But it's just like, hey, like I know any person you may not understand or disagree with, maybe we can challenge everybody to just like, hey, like, let's go grab a drink. Like, let's have lunch. Like, let's just like, chat about some shit, like, catch up on a personal level. But I know we had some disagreements on this particular thing. Like, let's chat about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, bro, you've gone your whole life as a white guy. So, like, all of your experiences are all through that filter, and all the benefits and the downfalls of it. Like, like that's it. And so you don't really get access to anyone else's experience because you've gone through your entire life as a white guy. And vice versa, like I've gone through my entire life as a black guy. So I have some unique experiences toward these topics that highlight certain things.
Yeah.
For
sure. Well, this is the purpose of this show. And this is, I'm going to be challenging myself to...
Outspoken?
Well, I think one thing, as I started this show, a lot of people I've known well or known at least somewhat well, right? And I think what I'm going to be doing this year, because I'm running out of friends to interview, is challenging myself to just have people on that I don't know at all, which there's been a couple, but not many. And I think that's going to be a growth opportunity for me, having conversations similar to what we've had today with somebody I don't know as well. It's obviously a little more challenging, and it's because that's what people are doing in everyday life, right? Like I'm fortunate to where you just will like hop on and we can chat about it. But that's really not how I think everyday life works with people that you disagree with. We're both willing to just chat things through, and I open to changing my perspective. I feel like every time we chat, I feel like I like to have a slight new understanding or something or whatever it is. But obviously that's not like how the world unfortunately is at this present moment. I think we can get there, and I think we can just encourage people and like raise our kids to just, hey, like have tough conversations with people. It's okay. It's part of life, right? Like we're not going to agree on everything, and that's fucking fine. If anything, that's great. Like that's the greatest thing about the country we live in, or one of the greatest. It's hard to say what the greatest is, but one of the greatest is that like we don't have to agree on everything. Like that's why we had colonies and we have states, is because all these people from all different parts of the world with different religious beliefs and different values, they had separate colonies, and then those turns into states. Like it's okay for us not to agree, but to just be able to like have conversations and realize that most of us are just trying to, and you touched on it earlier, live a better life, love their family, achieve happiness. We all have, I hope, have that in common. Maybe there's some of us that don't want to achieve happiness, but I imagine most of us do, and most of us...
Some people don't think it's possible for them.
Maybe.
And that's different,
Maybe. But yeah, I think if we can come to an agreement that, okay, we don't agree on much, but we at least agree that we love our family and we want to achieve happiness, right? Okay, we agree on something. That's a good start, and go from there. I think it's awesome. Like we don't have to agree on everything, and we can respect people and have them in our lives, even though we don't agree on every
Yeah,
little thing.
I don't think agreement is critical to building powerful relationships. You know, there are a lot of people I don't agree with, but I care about, or I want to see win, and I celebrate them and their life and their experience. That doesn't mean I share their perspective or agree with them. It's just not necessary, you know, for me to care about someone. And also, you know, I don't have this barrier that like, we must have the same views. That's why, like, sometimes, you know, I have friends on Facebook and they piss me off and I'm like, you're a fucking dick. But that doesn't mean that I don't care about them and mean well for them.
Yeah.
You know, like they have like really weird, shitty views. And I have experienced quite a bit of that over the last, you know, year or so with like the whole Black Lives Matter thing and the whole political thing. Like there are a lot of people I'm like mad at them right now. And also like I care about them, you know. And I think there's room for that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is going to come up in your life at one point or the other. And it, you know, comes up in my life, and I'm sure it'll come up more. Like, how many conservative parents have super liberal kids when they get a car, or the opposite, you know, super liberal parents, you know, their kids are love Ben Shapiro, and like, you know, your own kids are going to have different, your own siblings, your own kids, your own parents are going to have different beliefs. Like, not that we're allowed to get frustrated. I think it's okay to be like, hey, that's kind of annoying. You're being kind of a dick. I'm kind of mad at you right now. I think that's okay. Yeah, but also acknowledging, like, even though this is annoying and this is a present state of mind, but I still care about you and I still want the best for you. And just being able to separate those two things
Sure.
in your head. So one final thing, is there anything that you want to bring up or mention or discuss before we skedaddle on out of here?
No, not really. You know, I think there's some real power and beauty in having hard conversations. Hard conversations don't necessarily mean destruction of relationship. It definitely can mean connection. Like the last conversation we had, I feel like we touched on a lot of hard points, and I know there were people that listened to that. You know, and generally speaking, I was able to form more relationships from my candid nature in that regard. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they agreed with what I had to say, but I think they resonated with my my ability to just show up and be who I am about it, you know, and think what I think freely and say what I think freely without having to filter it or feeling like I'm just not that person, you know. But yeah, I don't feel like I have any closing arguments. Keep having hard conversations, keep showing up and being courageous inside of those conversations and being interested in people. And I think that is a real recipe for building extraordinary relationships.
Likewise, I agree with that. And if you're open to it, maybe come on later this year and see how you're feeling about everything under a Biden's America. So
we'll see. Yeah, I'm open to it, man. Of course. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for listening to Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player so you get updated when new episodes are live. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to support is to leave a 5-star review and share the podcast with people in your life that you feel would benefit from these types of discussions. Visit openlyoutspoken.com for additional details on the show. Find out how to connect with Jeremy on social media and learn more information about Jeremy's personal and business life. We'll see you next time.